Hi everyone. So it's been a while since I last recorded a video for this Explained Correctly series, and there's a good reason for that. Namely, this little guy. I'm now a daddy, and I have a son, and my son is on me right now because he doesn't sleep when he's just put in the cot. He has to be on someone, and my wife is too, well, she's been looking after him all day, so I'm looking after him. So yeah, so the next video in the Explain Correctly series is the ENTJ, the entrepreneur, and I'm going to bust some myths about the ENTJ here. This idea of ENTJs being the big bossy boots of the different 16 types is not true. They can end up in positions of power, but that's not the point. The point for them is actually they're very independently minded and they want to achieve things in the long run. They actually have no desire to really lead other people for its own sake. And that's what's confused. They're also not nearly as assertive as a natural strength as one may think from looking at typical ENTJ profiles. But yeah, look at the entrepreneur, the ENTJ, not the field marshal, which I think has always been a silly name for the ENTJ coming from Kiersey. And yeah, we'll just go into a deeper dive, really. So first of all, we have the ego block. For the ENTJ, this is what the ENTJ brings to the world, and it's extroverted thinking and introverted intuition. So these two things together, again, like with the INTP, the critic, it's very much about that independent critical thought. It's about thinking pragmatically and strategically. So over the long run, what's going to work in the long run is the key thing here. That with a sense of independence and especially independent achievement is very important for these sorts of types. These are the types that want to see things work in the long run fundamentally, and they don't want to waste their time with things which don't work in the long run or could lead to bad outcomes in the long run. Now, where the ENTJ is different to the INTP, especially, is that the dominant function is extroverted thinking. So this is a type which puts extroverted thinking front and center. And that's not about being bossy, not at all about being bossy. That's not the point of it. It's about being pragmatic. It's about looking at the facts. It's taking an empirical approach to knowledge rather than a theoretical approach to knowledge, right? It's gathering facts. It's having an approach to gathering facts of being as factual as possible, as based in the data as one can, of learning and casting a broad net of the data to know as much as one can on the relevant topics, to be as well informed. And the goal for that is to be as efficient and competent as possible. Competence is key for the ENTJ, and they want to maximize their exercise of their competence by gathering that knowledge, which is basically knowledge is power. That is the raw material from which they are able to exercise the most pragmatic, most effective, efficient, far-reaching decisions. And yeah, that means ENTJs never really, these aren't types which rest much. These are types which are always sort of on the go, being as effective as they can. The goalpost is always moving. It's never about, oh, I just got to do this and tick this box. No, ENTJs are not box tickers. They are, okay, what is the next objective? What can we do next? How can we get this other thing done so that we can actually move things forward and be as effective as we can? And they're constantly, that dynamo is being as effective as possible. And yeah, things being as efficient. If things aren't as efficient as possible, they can get quite frustrated. So extroverted thinking is there front and center. Again, it's not about being the boss of others. They don't care about being the boss of others. They just don't want them to be the boss of them and deprive them of the ability to be as competent as they can be in exercising their decision-making ability in service of their goals. So yeah, ENTJs are very much about the efficiency, first and foremost, which is very much built up from their factual knowledge. Now, supporting that is introverted intuition. So this provides that more strategic flavor to an ENTJ. It's not about the day-to-day practicality. It's not about things working well in the here and now. That's not important. That seems trivial for the ENTJ. It's about the achievement of long-term goals, right? Is this plan, is this idea going to work years from now? Is it actually going to be something which leads to a long-term outcome? Or is it actually going to fall flat in the years to come? Is it just never going to work? Is it inevitable? So they've got a lot like the INTP. The critic, they've got that long-term scrutinizing going on. But the idea is that it's more serving the extroverted thinking now. The idea is that they want to be as pragmatic, as efficient as possible, and they see that in the context more of the long term rather than the short term. And they are more about, things of strategic merit, what is likely to happen. These are types which very much value their independent knowledge, their ability to draw inferential conclusions from the data in a way which, say, an ESTJ wouldn't be so comfortable doing. They are confident in their independence, being able to draw these conclusions rather than having to actually see it necessarily directly in front of them. They have a more of a sort of intuitive, inferential dimension to their thinking, which introverted intuition provides. And yes, they're more like to see things in the general big picture as opposed to the smaller details, which I can struggle to remember sometimes. So yeah, that's introverted intuition. Now we move on to the superego block. This is the block which is not valued and not strong. So for ENTJs, this is something which they sort of have to put up with in the world. They don't like to do it. And FE plus SI together is that sort of day-to-day niceties, the small talk, the making comfortable, nice, pleasant spaces, that sort of more communal, consensus-driven decision-making. ENTJs are independently minded. They don't like to suffer fools very much, but they know that there's often a nice environment to be around, which they have to sort of curtail aspects of behavior to differing levels of success. Now, where they are somewhat successful in this is their role function, which is extroverted feeling. ENTJs definitely have the mask as their mask, you could say, in extroverted feeling, how you're coming across to others being the thing which the ENTJ has to sort of put on as a role. And why is that the case? Well, the idea is that for the ENTJ, they want to be competent. They want to get things done efficiently, effectively, right? But they realize that people don't always grasp that. Sometimes they have to think more politically. How are things going to come across to other people? How can they make sure they don't make enemies, which could then lead to problems in the long run in terms of them actually achieving their goals? So what ENTJs often do is, whereas privately they can be often quite harsh, in public they may put together a more sort of polite, a more sort of bland public profile, you could say. They should be relatively engaging. They should be good at actually, if they need to give a talk, need to give a speech, they should be able to make that entertaining enough and come across well and relatively charismatically to others if need be. They adapt to the social expectation of them to put on some amount of performance and some amount of tact in how they're coming across, basically. It's not that the ENTJ enjoys it, it's just they know they have to do it because they don't want to have their plans fail. And they can recognize that and they can adapt to that. So yeah, they can be relatively nice. Think of someone like Jeff Bezos, right? His social media profile, very, very bland stuff. You may see it. The sort of thing you just expect to see, where if you don't see it, you may think, oh, he's not a very nice person or something like that. So basically, extroverted feeling from the ENTJ is always about mitigating damage, social damage, political damage, which can get in the way of their goals. It's not constructive to be hated. So the ENTJ knows they actually need to be relatively liked enough. And that's why they do it. If they don't like it, if it deviates from them being factually true and oriented towards what actually works and saying what they think, then they feel like they're giving away part of their soul, you could say. But they realize they have to do it, and they are susceptible to that pressure to have to do it in public. So yes. Next, though, you have introverted sensation. And this is the blind spot for an ENTJ. This is the thing they can't quite adapt to. ENTJs are very much about doing whatever they can, learning whatever they can to overcome any sort of obstacle. But they never quite get introverted sensation. If you were to ask them questions about what they do to relax, an ENTJ will say, "Oh, well, I go on a run, or I might go mountaineering." And I've known ENTJs who go mountaineering for their holiday and come back with a broken rib in the worst state from when they actually left. This is the point. They don't really get relaxation. They don't understand or really process that natural calm and easygoing flow in the moment. These types are always switched on even if not physically, then mentally they are switched on. They're always having to think about something. If they are going on holiday, and they have to sort of sunbathe, that would be hell for them. They need a book or something to turn over in their head just to keep things going. They are always switched on. And they bring a certain amount of intensity. It's not always appropriate to the situation as a result. And it can be hard for other people to relax around an ENTJ for that very reason. They just can't really chill. Doesn't mean they can't be fun. They can be very fun. They've got extroverted feeling. They can adapt to that, certainly. But even when they're doing it, it's like everything is done a bit too much. So yeah, introverted sensation there is that blind spot. Sometimes the ENTJs, in their pursuit of being as efficient and effective as possible, kind of drag their bodies behind with them. These are types who eat to live rather than live to eat. They don't sort of just stop and just take in, smell the roses, enjoy the sensory perceptions as they are. They might like a thrill. They might like sort of bike riding or something which is adrenaline oriented, but they don't really do the oxytocin oriented enjoyment of the day-to-day very much. And yeah, that can show up very much in them being a bit too intense. People, struggling to really relax around them and them not really ever seeming to relax. And that can sometimes lead to burnout. That can sometimes lead to overworking, not realizing their limits and over pushing themselves, which is why it's often important for the ENTJs who end up so busy because of their need to be as efficient as possible. They need someone to hold them back a little bit in that regard, set down clear boundaries so that they don't run themselves into the sickbed, you could say. Okay, next we have the super id block. So this is the part which actually is valued by the ENTJ. Valued, but still weak. And that's introverted feeling and extroverted sensing. That's what's going on here. This is the harsh judgment zone. This is the part where it's about ascertaining people, character, setting up boundaries and going out and achieving things in a more concrete way with one-to-one relationships with people. And so ENTJs, they really aspire to become better at this. Some parts they grow into more, other parts they need help in. The part which they help in the most is introverted feeling. That's their suggestive function. ENTJs, they really need in life someone who can create and establish and set that right level of intimacy with them. They need a very strong, close, one-to-one personal relationship to be formed with them. Someone who gets them, understands their character, so that they can just say what is on their mind rather than put on that performance of being, all polite and gracious and all that other sort of stuff which ENTJs don't like to do but realize they have to do. Having that relationship frees them from that. It makes them feel as if they're no longer having to sell their soul to come across to others in the right way. They can just get to brass tacks, say what the facts are. That's what the ENTJ really wants to do. And they need that relationship of close, personal, one-to-one respect to do it. The problem is ENTJs are not good themselves at reading and understanding character. When they start off in the world, they may even be a bit too naive. Trust people who don't really deserve to be trusted. And they may end up being betrayed as a result in, say, a business deal, and they may overreact to that, get very sort of suspicious of people next, become quite paranoid, feeling to test people and their characters. They can't quite fit. They can't just look someone in the eye and know someone's character. They have to gather data. They have to gather statistics over time, longitudinal data on the person to know how much they really can trust them or not. And that can be quite a challenge in some relationships. ENTJs are not easy to date, I would say. But the point is, if they meet someone who is really solid in their loyalty, who makes very clear through their actions, with no doubt, that they are fixed in that relationship, they know where they stand, that person, as the ENTJ needs. They need someone who also can sort of keep them on their toes a little bit as well, someone who can challenge them, who can sort of talk back to them when they may be getting a bit too much, being a bit sort of difficult in their pursuit of what is most efficient and effective in the long run, and not actually keeping things balanced and not pursuing that golden mean. So, yeah, a personal close one-to-one relationship is incredibly important for an ENTJ. Without it, they just go out into the world and they achieve and they get things done, and they end up, in like their 50s and alone. ENTJs are naturally independent. It's not easy for them to build these sort of chummy, close one-to-one relationships. To move beyond the transactional and business oriented to the very deep and personal. That's where they need a bit of support from someone else. However, the mobilizing function, extroverted sensation, this is what an ENTJ takes on as their project to grow in and get better at. ENTJs can be quite critical of their strength, their assertiveness. They often feel as if they're actually secretly quite a weak person, someone who can be pushed around, and they don't want to be pushed around at all. They take it very much as a chip on their shoulder sometimes, that they need to assert themselves. They need to show, you can't tell me what to do. You can't push me around. I'm not going to dance to your tune. ENTJs have that independent achievement drive. They don't want to be subordinate to other people's will that could take away their independence and their ability to make their own decisions. So they're motivated to go out and achieve in a concrete way in the world so that no one else can establish power over them. And so they can maintain their independence for all time. Very important for an ENTJ to be able to do that. And that achievement, that restless, relentless drive, it adds that intensity. Not only are they very efficient and effective, but they're very much got that sort of nervous energy to constantly go out and try to push themselves and try to overcome obstacles in order to achieve more. But the point is, they don't start off physical, they start off more mental. These are the more nerdy types who start to learn martial arts and toughen up over time. Think of people like Sam Harris learning, I think it's judo or karate, something like that. This idea that for them, it's about toughen yourself up. Pick yourself up by your bootstraps and learn to be a tough person. Don't be weak and pathetic like you were when you were a child. That kind of thing can be quite a thing for an ENTJ. And yeah, they derive a lot of esteem from their ability to have toughened up, essentially. And sometimes that can get a bit much. They don't know how to read the nuances. They may over-egg their aggression in the moment. They may come across ridiculously, such as Quentin Tarantino in that famous interview, I'm Shutting Your Butt Down, with Krishnanga and Arthi. It's a very good example of the ENTJ where that sort of mobilizing extroverted sensation have a bit of a freak out over feeling like he's being told what to do and being sort of like a show monkey. And finally, we get to the id block. The id block, this is the part which is not valued, but is very strong. So first of all, we have the ignoring function for the ENTJ, which is introverted thinking. And here's the point, right? ENTJs are the least theoretical out of the NTs, right? They have little interest in structure and theory for the sake of theory. For them, it's all through the lens of how can it be used? How is this effective? How is this useful? How's it going to help me in achieving my goals? That's the point. They don't like theory for its own sake. They don't like ideological thinking. They cannot stand bureaucracy and structure and red tape getting in the way of them doing things which are effective. They're very much like the ESFP in this regard. They share that same distaste for bureaucracy. They're going to look at the rules and think, okay, how can we improve this better? And let's not stick into our comfort zones. Let's not do things just because that's the way it's been done before. Can we actually improve it? What data can we gather to actually optimize this process that actually works more effectively in the long run? So they're going to get frustrated with the structures and the rules. They're not going to like people saying, well, that's just not how it's done. That's not coherent with this and consistent with this. ENTJs are happy to chop and change things to make things work more efficiently and effectively. But unlike an ESFP, it's not a real blind spot. They can do the analysis of the structure. They can understand the principles underlying it. It's just not important to them, not compared to how things work. And so they'll utilize introverted thinking where it is useful. They're good at working with rules and structures as guidelines to lead to more effective practices in the long run. That's what they can do. They can work with that well, but it's only when it suits efficiency we see them utilizing introverted thinking in that sort of way. So yeah, analytical prowess, yes, but a focus on structure and ideology or theory for the sake of theory, absolutely not. Finally, we get to the demonstrative function, extroverted intuition. Now, this an ENTJ shows a lot more of, right? But without the introverted thinking so much. So it's very much about that sort of innovative problem solving which comes out, which is what they share with the ENTP, right? ENTJs are very good at casting a broad net into different ideas, broad interests, different things which could turn out to be useful. They start off in the world being very curious, very open. When they're not sure of themselves, they go back to speculating and turning different possibilities over in their heads. When they're more confident, they go towards extroverted sensation. They become more proactive, more assertive, more able to push things through. But to begin with, they're more likely to give things a chance, see where it could go. They're the most open-minded out of the gammas, I would say, for that very reason. But yeah, what extroverted intuition does very well is work in tandem with their introverted intuition. So it's not new ideas for the sake of new ideas. It's gathering data from all the different possibilities, all the different influences and interests to then direct that towards something of long-term relevance and importance, to synthesize that into a roadmap for long-term success. So yeah, that's what I'd say about the ENTJ. I hope that was helpful. Remember, my course has been out for a while now. If you want to learn more, please email worldsocionics@hotmail.com. I have a far more in-depth exploration of all the different types, the intertype relationships and theory that grounds it, all accessible via my course. So yeah, if you'd like to do that, if you like to learn to be a socionist, you like to learn to type people in Socionics effectively, then definitely come along and email worldsocionics@hotmail.com. Send an email titled course, and I'll send you more information so you can purchase some of those modules if you'd like. And it's all module based. So yeah, if you don't want to pay for the whole thing, that's fine. Pay for it module by module. Pay at the pace that you're happy with so that you can learn this very useful and very relevant theory that to an ENTJ unlocks so much in terms of their ability to understand others and understand their relationships and find those right relationships in life. All right. Thank you, everyone. Thanks for tuning in. All the best.